Usually when we think about how music is made, we picture a composer sitting at a piano, sort of just stacking individual notes together like Lego bricks.
Right, yeah. It feels incredibly additive, almost like conjuring something out of a void.
Exactly. You start with nothing, an empty page, and you slowly build up a song piece by piece. But then you encounter a framework that completely flips that image on its head.
Oh, completely. Suddenly the void isn't empty at all. It's actually completely full.
Yeah, you're not building with Lego bricks anymore. You're standing in front of a massive continuous block of stone.
It's a totally different paradigm. You aren't building, you're carving.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into a really fascinating framework today by Urson Eason, which is laid out in his book, Foundations of Music. And let me just warn you right now, this is not your typical music theory breakdown.
No, definitely not. It completely ignores cultural meaning. It skips over historical narratives entirely.
Right, and it doesn't care at all about genre rules or any of that. It strips music down to its absolute physical and, well, perceptual bare bones.
It asks a much harder question, honestly. How do musical phenomena actually exist, evolve, and become perceptible to us in the first place?
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really grasp how radical this is, we have to understand the foundational worldview here.
Which is exactly why that carving metaphor is so crucial. The foundational visual concept here is that music is an act of extraction.
Extraction.
Right.
Right, so we're not adding, we're pulling away.
Exactly. There is this continuous, they call it a sound manifold. It's a massive, limitless space of acoustic possibility out there in the universe. A specific piece of music is simply a shape that has been carved out of that raw acoustic material.
So we don't just dive into, Beethoven or Miles Davis. We start at the absolute bottom of human experience.
Yeah, we have to look at the levels of description. Imagine a pyramid, right? At the very bottom, the absolute bedrock foundational layer, you have sound, just pure physical vibration in the air.
Just raw physics. And then above that,
Above that is perception. So how our human biology processes those vibrations. And then above that is control and structure, which is how we actively organize those processed signals.
and notice what's missing from the bottom of that pyramid, right?
Yeah, higher layers like emotion, cultural meaning, stylistic rules, those sit way up at the top.
Wait, so the book is saying emotion and culture don't matter?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This framework argues that those things are absolutely real and super important, but they are emergent properties.
Ah, okay. So they only exist because of the structural and perceptual foundations beneath them.
Exactly. So for today's exploration, we are staying entirely in the basement. We are looking strictly at sound, perception, and structure.
So if we have this massive block of stone, this sound manifold, and we want to carve music out of it, we first need to understand the tool doing the carving. And that tool is the human ear.
Right, we really have to look at the evolutionary context of hearing because it fundamentally dictates what music can even be. I mean, hearing wasn't designed so we could sit in a concert hall and enjoy a symphony.
Right, it's not a luxury feature.
No, hearing is an evolved biological solution to a very raw, physical, problem-detecting vibration for survival.
It's like a localized alarm system.
Pure survival mechanics.
Yeah.
You needed to know the direction of a snapping twig to avoid a predator. You needed spatial awareness of your environment to hunt.
So because of that brutal evolutionary history, human perception basically serves as the absolute boundary condition for what can even be considered music.
Yes, music does not bypass our biology. It operates strictly within it.
But how does it actually do that? Because I think, we tend to imagine the ear as just a fleshy funnel that dumps raw sound waves directly into the brain for processing.
Oh, but the mechanics are so much more aggressive than that. It is not a passive microphone at all. The ear performs a sequence of intense mechanical transformations before your brain even gets involved.
Wait, really? Before the brain?
Yeah. Let's start with the outer ear, the pinna. That's the visible part on the side of your head. The ridges and folds there aren't random.
They actually do something.
They actively shape incoming sound waves. They delay certain frequencies by microseconds, so your brain can calculate whether a sound is coming from above, below, behind, or in front of you.
That is wild. Okay, so then the sound travels down the canal and hits the middle ear.
Right, where we run into a major physics problem. Sound waves are traveling through the air, but the inner ear, which is what ultimately sends the signal to your brain, is actually filled with fluid.
Oh, right. And anyone who has ever tried to talk to someone underwater knows that doesn't work well at all.
Exactly. It's called an acoustic impedance mismatch.
An acoustic impedance mismatch.
Yeah. If sound waves in the air just hit the fluid of the inner ear directly, Almost all the energy would just bounce right off. It's like trying to yell into a swimming pool from the deck.
Right. The person underwater just hears a muffled thump. So how does the ear fix that?
Well, the middle ear solves this with the tympanic membrane, your eardrum, and 3 tiny little ossicle bones.
Oh, the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. I remember those from grade school.
Right. They act as a mechanical lever system. They collect the vibration from the relatively large surface area of the eardrum and concentrate it all onto a tiny window leading to the inner ear.
So they're physically forcing the airborne sound into the dense fluid.
Exactly. They act as an impedance matching system. They amplify the signal immensely, so absolutely nothing is lost.
Wow. And then the sound enters the inner ear, specifically the cochlea, which is where I guess the real magic happens.
Yeah, the cochlea is essentially a tiny fluid-filled tube coiled up like a snail shell, and running right down the middle of it is the basilar membrane.
The basilar membrane, okay.
This is arguably the most important biological structure for understanding music. As the fluid inside the cochlea pulses from those little bones, the basilar membrane ripples. But it isn't uniform.
What do you mean by not uniform?
Well, it's stiff and narrow at the base and wide and floppy at the apex.
Oh, so kind of like a guitar string versus a thick bass string, which means different parts of the membrane vibrate in response to different frequencies.
Precisely. High frequencies cause the stiff base to vibrate, while low frequencies travel all the way down to the floppy apex.
That's incredible.
The membrane physically decomposes a complex sound wave into its individual frequency components.
Yeah.
It maps frequency to physical space.
So it's a tonotopic structure.
Yes. And all this happens before the tiny hair cells sitting on that membrane even transduce the vibration into an electrical signal for the nervous system.
So it's like a prism. Like if you shine white light into a prism, it mechanically separates that messy light into a clean rainbow of individual colors.
That's a great analogy.
The cochlea is an acoustic prism. It breaks a messy chord into its individual notes, physically, not computationally.
What's fascinating here is that this completely reshapes how we view the audio signal. The brain isn't doing the heavy lifting of sorting out frequencies.
The ear already did the math.
Exactly. The calculus has already been done mechanically by the time the nervous system gets the signal. The audio is already pre-structured.
So the ear isn't just a passive microphone recording the world. It's more like an aggressive bouncer at a club.
A bouncer. How so?
Well, it doesn't just check IDs. It physically rearranges the line, categorizes people by height, and groups them before they are even allowed into the brain's VIP section.
That's spot on. And that biological filtering creates hard limits. I mean, consider the relationship between rhythm and pitch.
Okay.
If I tap a desk twice a second, your brain registers that as a rhythm, 2 distinct events. But if I magically speed up that tapping to, say, 80 times a second,
You stop hearing individual taps, it becomes a hum.
exactly, your biology hits a processing threshold. The individual events blur together, and your ear suddenly perceives it as a continuous low pitch.
Wait, so rhythm and pitch aren't fundamentally different things in the universe?
Yeah. They are the exact same physical phenomenon of vibration. But our biological boundary condition maps them as totally different experiences.
Okay, that is wild. So biology sets the absolute guardrails. It establishes the field of viable exploration.
Right.
But if our biology limits what we can hear, how do we actually map out the musical structures that do make it past the bouncer?
I think this brings us to the formal framework of the text, which is musical state spaces.
Yes. And this requires a massive shift in how you visualize music. We have to stop thinking of music as a collection of items.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you're telling me that notes, chords, motifs, the things we think of as the fundamental building blocks of music are not fundamental objects at all.
They are not objects, no.
Wait, hold on. If I sit down at the piano and press a key, I am literally producing a C sharp. It's a thing. I can hear it. How can you say it's not an object?
Because a C sharp is just a label we give to a specific location within a broader
A
continuum.
location.
Instead of discrete objects, the framework demands that we view music as consisting of abstract, high-dimensional spaces. A musical space defines what can possibly exist.
So what are these spaces? Like, how do we navigate them? We can break them down into 3 primary domains. First is pitch space. This isn't just a simple list of frequencies from low to high.
Right. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, it includes the structural relationships between them. It includes intervals and what we call attraction centers or tonal gravitation.
Tonal gravitation, like how if you sing the happy birthday song and stop on the second to last note, it feels deeply tense.
Exactly.
That note physically feels like it wants to resolve to the final home note.
That tension doesn't exist in the sound wave itself. It is a structural feature of pitch space. The notes exert gravity on each other.
Okay, so that's pitch space. What's the second one?
Second, we have rhythmic or temporal space. This isn't just about discrete durations like quarter notes. It's about timing relations, the underlying pulse, and temporal grouping.
So how temporal patterns evolve and pull against each other over time.
Exactly. And finally, we have timbral space.
Timbral space, which is the quality or color of the sound, right?
Right. The spectral distribution, the attack decay, and the continuum between pure tones and pure noise.
So a trumpet playing a C sharp and a violin playing a C sharp occupy the exact same coordinate in pitch space, but they exist in vastly different regions of timbral space.
You've got it perfectly.
Let me try an analogy here. Think of a state space, like a massive open-world video game map.
Okay, I like where this is going.
That C sharp on the piano isn't a sword you can pick up and put in your inventory. It's a specific GPS coordinate on the map.
Right.
The music isn't the coordinate itself. The music is the trajectory. It's the path you take walking to that coordinate, passing through it, and moving to the next one.
That is a perfect visualization. We really have to view music as the continuous, coupled evolution of trajectories through these multiple spaces simultaneously.
So you are navigating the map, and the paths available to you are constrained by those biological thresholds we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
So if music is a trajectory through these spaces, if it's the journey across the map, what is driving the vehicle, how do a musician actually move from one coordinate to another? Because they don't just teleport.
Well, they have to move. And that brings us to the concept of control and gesture.
Control and gesture.
Yeah. If the spaces dictate where music can exist, control dictates how it moves. Control is defined here as directed change applied over time.
Directed change applied over time. I like that.
This is a crucial pivot because it exposes a massive illusion in Western music.
Which is?
The written note on a piece of sheet music.
Wait, I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Are you saying sheet music isn't actually music at all? Because that's a pretty bold claim for something musicians have relied on for centuries.
Well, think about it structurally. A written note on a staff is completely static. It just sits there.
True.
But we just established that music is, by definition, movement and trajectory. So the structure we hear isn't the ink on the page. It is a physical state produced under a very specific control regime.
So gesture is the physical manifestation of that.
Exactly. Gesture is the embodied, physical realization of that control across the state spaces.
So sheet music is just a suggestion.
The text calls it a partial specification. Going back to your map analogy, sheet music gives you the GPS coordinates. It tells you to go from point A to point B.
But it doesn't dictate the exact control behavior you use to travel between those coordinates. Are you walking, running, sliding, gliding?
Exactly. This is why 10 incredibly talented singers will sound fundamentally different performing the exact same piece of sheet music.
Right, because they are hitting the same coordinates, but their physical gestures, their trajectories through the state spaces, are entirely unique to their own bodies.
The book highlights vocal performance precisely for this reason. The human voice is the purest, most concentrated expression of control because it's directly linked to the body.
Because a singer is continuously managing pitch, time, and resonance all at exactly the same time.
Yes. Take something like vocal vibrato or a portamento, a pitch slide. In standard music theory, you might just draw a little squiggly line over a note to indicate vibrato. But in this spatial framework, a vibrato isn't a one-dimensional curve.
What is it?
It's a multidimensional vector. It is made of stability, oscillation, directedness, and regularity. It is a highly complex physical gesture navigating through pitch and timbral space simultaneously, driven by minute physical changes in the vocal cords.
Okay, so we've got the biological filter of the ear deciding what gets in. We've got the state spaces that define the open world map. And we've got control and gesture, which is how we physically drive the vehicle through the map.
Right.
So how do we manipulate those trajectories to create actual art?
That leads to the core engine of creativity, transformations. Because making music isn't just about moving randomly. It's about re-expressing structures to create meaning.
So what does this all mean practically? The text defines a transformation as re-expressing a musical structure in a new way, while preserving its perceptual identity?
It divides these into two main categories, intraspace and interspace transformations.
Let's start with intraspace.
Intraspace transformations happen within a single space. The classic example in pitch space is transposition moving a melody to a higher or lower key.
Pretty straightforward.
But to show how complex this really is, the text looks at Makam music, which is traditional Middle Eastern modal music.
Oh, because transposing a makama melody isn't just about shifting the absolute pitch up or down a few steps on a keyboard.
Far from it. A makam isn't just a scale. It dictates a seer, which is a mandatory melodic pathway or progression.
Right, it has specific tonal gravities.
When you transpose a makam, you can't just slide the frequencies up. You have to shift the entire gravitational field.
Wow.
You are preserving the specific melodic trajectories and the attraction centers. The invisible pull between the notes has to feel mathematically identical, just relocated to a new area of pitch space.
But then there are inner space transformations, which happen across different spaces entirely. And this is where my brain really had to do a backflip.
You mean the concept of jazz translation?
Yes, jazz translation.
It's a brilliant application of the theory. In jazz translation, the melodic core, the identity of the motif, is preserved, but it is projected into vastly expanded harmonic and performative spaces.
So you take a simple nursery rhyme, like Mary Had a Little Lamb. In jazz, you keep that core identity, but suddenly you are shifting its rhythmic tension by adding swing.
Right, you're bending the pitches.
You're layering incredibly complex, dense harmony underneath it. The literal notes change, the rhythm stretches, the timbre gets raspy from a muted trumpet, but your brain still immediately recognizes the underlying core structure of the nursery rhyme.
Exactly. You are shifting the structural invariant around the manifold. Or take another example, taking a vocal pitch bend, which is a gesture strictly in pitch space, and translating the shape of that bend into a rhythmic motif, which is a gesture in temporal space.
So you're mapping melodic tension onto rhythmic tension.
Yes.
It reminds me of translating a famous poem, say, from French to English.
How so?
Well, the literal words, the space you are operating in, completely change. You lose the exact syllables and the original rhymes.
Right.
But the emotional weight, the cadence, the rhythm, the perceptual identity of the poem must remain strictly intact for it to still be the same poem. If you just do a literal word-for-word dictionary translation, you kill the art. You have to transform it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this framework proves something incredibly profound about human art.
What's that?
Creativity is almost never about producing structures out of thin air. It is entirely about constructing meaningful transformations between existing structures.
So it's about exploring the neighborhood around an idea, preserving the perceptual identity that matters, and shifting the rest.
Exactly.
Okay, so looking at this entire framework, we've gone from the tympanic membrane vibrating in your ear all the way up to complex jazz translation and Makam transposition.
This raises an important question, though.
Yeah.
What is the ultimate value of tearing music down to this level of abstraction? Why bother stripping away culture and emotion to look at state spaces?
I was just wondering that myself.
And the answer is that Foundations of Music gives us a neutral structural language.
A neutral language.
Yes. When you talk about music in terms of cultural rules or historical genres, you inevitably introduce bias, hierarchy, and judgment.
You start saying one tradition is more advanced or complex than another based on completely arbitrary cultural metrics.
Right. But by reducing it to state spaces, control, and transformation, we can analyze a Turkish makam, an American jazz solo, a European classical symphony, and a folk singer's raw vocal improvisation using the exact same structural vocabulary.
That's amazing.
It doesn't tell us what music is good. It simply shows us how music happens.
And for you listening, I think this offers a massive aha moment.
Definitely.
It frees you from the pressure of feeling like you have to memorize a textbook of arbitrary stylistic rules to truly understand music. You don't need to know the historical context of a chord progression to feel its gravity.
Exactly. You just have to listen for the movement. You listen for the space the musician is exploring, the physical control they are exerting to get there, and how they transform an idea over time.
You are listening to the trajectory.
You are listening to them navigate the beautiful constraints of their own biology.
Which actually brings me to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire deep dive establishing that human ear mechanics and our evolutionary biology dictate the strict boundary conditions of what can be perceived as music. The bouncer at the club only lets certain vibrations in, and it forces them into very specific lines.
The biological filter is absolute.
Right now, it is. But we live in an era where we are relying more and more heavily on synthetic, algorithmic, and AI-generated music.
That's true.
We are using computers to create sounds and rhythmic complexities that have never existed in nature and that a human body could never physically perform.
We are generating trajectories that don't require human control.
Exactly. So what happens to that sound manifold as we start hacking sounds that intentionally bypass or play tricks on our natural evolutionary filters?
That's a great question.
If we push synthetic control far enough, will our fundamental definition of musical space be forced to evolve to accommodate it? Or will our biology simply put its foot down, hit a processing threshold, and reject those new trajectories as meaningless noise?
Are we reaching the edge of the stone we've been carving?
That is the question. Something to mull over the next time you put your headphones on and hear a sound you can't quite identify. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the bare bones of music. Keep listening for the movement, and we'll see you next time.